Welcome to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life. Today we're in Dade County, Georgia. Here I am standing on the Georgia-Alabama line, and we're going to learn about the plantation schools and other historical things that happened in Dade County. So let's take a look and see what we can find. This marker in Dade County, Georgia, definitely been here a while, a little bit difficult to read. It's for the Nisbet Plantation, the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. Cloverdale was a successful stock plantation established by Colonel James Cooper Nisbet and his brother. At the start of the war, James Nisbet raised a company for the 21st Georgia Infantry Regiment and went to Virginia as a captain. In the spring of 1863, Nisbet was promoted to colonel and sent back to Macon, Georgia to raise a regiment. Colonel Nisbet's parents were at the plantation when General William Haynes Lytle, a Federal brigade commander, on his way to Chickamauga, stopped at the site. General Lytle, who served with distinction during the Mexican War, had later made a name for himself as a lawyer in Ohio and was also a published poet. He was a natural gentleman and seemed charmed by the social graces of the Nisbet family. The rest of this is getting harder and harder to read, so come visit this and see how much you can read. It has definitely seen some age to it, and I think they need to redo this one. Here we are in Dade County, Georgia, near Rising Fawn, and this one is for the Cureton Plantation. This is part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. James William Cureton was born on December 25th, 1829 in North Carolina. As a young man, he went to Tennessee, where he married Nancy Boyd. In 1849, he moved to Dade County in Georgia with the intention of finding a good site for a water-powered mill. His household consisted of himself, his wife Nancy, his widowed mother, his sister Nancy, and her husband Alexander Smith. At that time, he owned 2 middle-aged enslaved Africans. He located a good site for his proposed mill and established his estate and called it Dademont. He built a mill dam and constructed a sawmill, a grist mill, and installed equipment to operate a water-powered wood carding machine. He also manufactured furniture from local hardwoods. In 1859, he purchased a Negro boy named John. The 1860 federal census shows James Cureton as being 34 years old, living with his wife Nancy, age 30, a son John, age 11, a son George, age 9, another son William, age 5, and a daughter Mary, age 1. He owned 3 enslaved Africans and maintained 1 Negro house. At the start of the war, James Cureton served as a sergeant in the 10th Regiment of the Georgia State Troops until that unit was disbanded in the fall of 1861. He then raised a company of men from the local area called the Dade County Invincibles that became Company D in the 39th Georgia Infantry Regiment in the Confederate Army. Captain Cureton was away with the Army when the Federal invasion took place in 1863. With the repairs we have put upon the road, General Negley informed General Thomas on September 6, 1863, from Cureton's, it is excellent to this point. The creek water is sufficiently good for cooking purposes. A safe and convenient camping ground with a field of matured corn nearby, a very suitable place for your headquarters temporarily. At Cureton's, there was an excellent spring creek close by and good camping grounds. General Sheridan was here personally and proposed to encamp his division here. At 11:30 a.m. on September 6, 1863, a member of Sheridan's command wrote, "We halted at a farmhouse which betokened a wealthy owner, James Cureton. As far as appearances went, we rested 1/2 hour in a beautiful grove, then took the rocky and dusty road and moved slowly on. The heat was oppressive in the valley. Many of the men had to drop out, and at 1 p.m. the number of the men present with the regiment at the head of the marching column did not much exceed 100. At 2:30 p.m. we bivouacked 6 miles south of Trenton on Lookout Creek. Cureton remained with the Confederate Army until he was disabled by a leg wound during the Battle of Atlanta. After the war, Cureton continued his milling operations and expanded his farming activities. He served several terms in the Georgia legislature, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. This marker's in Dade County, Georgia, near Trenton, and it's White Oak Gap. September 1863, the Army of the Cumberland enters Dade County. General James Negley led his 14th Army Corps Division of the Federal Army of the Cumberland into Dade County by way of White Oak Gap in early September of 1863. My division has arrived, he reported, and is encamped at Brown's Spring. A sufficiency of water has been obtained by excavating the spring. I enclose you a sketch showing the disposition of the troops, also of the road to this point. The road has been repaired as much as possible and is passable. The descent of the mountain is, however, very rough and cannot be remedied. My trains are all up safe, excepting the few wagons sent to the rear for supplies left at Moore Spring. Negley led the way over Lookout Mountain by way of Johnson's Creek and cut into the battlefield of Chickamauga. When General William T. Sherman brought a relief army to Chattanooga, which was under siege after the Battle of Chickamauga, he wanted to deceive the Confederates as to his route. General Hugh Ewing, Sherman's brother-in-law, moved his division against Trenton on November 18, 1863, by way of White Oak Gap. He had been instructed to make a feint toward Trenton and Lookout Mountain, while the main Federal force went directly to Chattanooga. General Ewing reported to General Sherman from Trenton, "The head of my column reached here at 10 a.m. I have camped the rear brigade on the mountain overlooking the town. Cockrell and course in town. We threw a few shells at some cavalry, 6th Kentucky Cavalry Regiment, CSA, who retreated downstream." The next day, General Ewing informed Sherman of the distribution of his brigades. "Loomis built extensive fires on the edge of the mountain last night," he wrote, "which showed well. Course camped above town, looking up the valley, and Cockrell below, looking down. I have sent Course to take position at the mouth of this gap, fronting upstream and covering his communication, to send one regiment to the top of Lookout to show its head and send out pickets, build fires, and demonstrate generally, but with caution, a second regiment to camp halfway up. I have ordered Loomis to descend to Raccoon Mountain in this afternoon," and I really can't read that part down there, "with a show in fires about 4 or 5 miles above here. Also to build fires at his camp of last night on the mountain above Wims. I have also ordered Course last night camp to be lit up. Cockrell this afternoon will move 2 regiments across Lookout Creek. On November 20th, General Ewing issued special orders to destroy the machinery and stacks of all ironworks in Lookout Valley." A refugee from Dade County provided an account of the destruction to the editor of the Athens Sun-Banner. "We hear the following from a gentleman, citizen of Dade County. The courthouse and jail were burned. Our informant says the town of Trenton is completely demolished." We're here in Trenton, Georgia, for this Union School, 1890 to 1927. The original school was located about 1 mile south of the current Trenton city limit on State Highway 11. It was used as a school, church, barn, and residence. The original building was completely destroyed by a tornado. 98% of the building was restored using the original wood. The building was last used as a school in 1925, and then here is the actual school. Looks like they even had an outhouse on the side. So the Union School from 1890 to 1927. This marker near Trenton, Georgia is Payne's Sutton's Mill, part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. Once again, it's very difficult to read. In fact, part of it is actually missing. The mill was built in 1836 by Jake Sitton, who operated it for a number of years. The material for the building was cut in Sand Mountain by Edward Price. All the lumber was of pure pine and was transported to the site by wagon, with the axles liberally lubricated with tar and drawn by oxen. The miller was Matthew Mashburn. In September 1603, the Federal Army occupied the mill south of Trenton, and for some reason called it Payne's Mill rather than the better-known name of Sitton's Mill. Since Mashburn, the miller, was 56 years old at the time, it's possible that a younger man named Payne was operating the mill when the Army took it over. There may have been a connection between this mill and the Empire. Located farther up Lookout Creek, the ironworks were built under contract with the Confederate government, and it is possible that the mill was also taken over by the government and used as a support facility, with someone named Payne being in charge. On September 4th, 1863, General James Negley sent a detachment out to find a mill in a central location that could be used to grind grain for the Army. The next morning, Lieutenant Colonel Archibald Blakely led the 78th Pennsylvania Regiment on this reconnaissance. The men went up the valley to the mill on Lookout Creek. He wrote this mill was filled with wheat, corn, and rye. He halted there and placed Captain Marlin of Company A in charge of the mill. We ground out all there was in it. We scoured the Lookout Valley and gathered the ground till all the grain we could find, turning the product over to the passing army. We also gathered and turned in to the troops all the cattle we could find fit for beef, taking care to leave with each family enough for their support. The Pennsylvania men complained about the work at the mill, and General George Thomas relieved them with King's Brigade from Reynolds' division that had been camped at Trenton. We were relieved from guard duty about 9 o'clock a.m. Private William B. Miller, 75th Indiana Infantry Regiment, rode on September 8th and returned to camp. The 75th did not move, but and then the part of this is missing here. Something about guarding the mill. A few soldiers were left behind as the Army crossed Lookout Mountain after the Battle of Chickamauga. Colonel Archibald Blakely of the 78th Pennsylvania Infantry wrote, "When the Army had passed us at the mill, we had a squad of 16 men too sick to march, and we had no transport for them. I therefore detailed Private W.S. Hossick of Company G, an excellent physician, to take charge of them and remain with them, leaving them techs, supplies, and medicine. We have not heard from them, and I suppose they have been captured. Our location at the mill was very unhealthy, and we suffered much sickness here." We're in the state park near Trenton, Georgia, and this one is for Stories in Stone, Cloudland Canyon's Rugged Landscape. Talks about bluffs and ripple marks, the limestone-rich caves, and the Cumberland Plateau. One of the characteristics that makes the Cloudland Canyon State Park distinct from almost all other Georgia state parks is its rugged geographic features. Aside from the deep canyons, two specific geologic attributes can be seen easily from your vantage point: the sandstone cliffs, or bluffs as we call them locally, and ripple marks. Then from your current vantage point, almost all of the exposed rock within the state park that you see is sandstone. However, 1,000 feet below you and 2 miles distance at the end of the canyon underneath the houses, farm fields, and forest canopy, an underlayer of limestone exists. This north end of the canyon is home to the park's limestone-rich Sitton's Cave, a wild cave with over 1.5 miles of underground passageways. Both sandstone and limestone are sedentary rocks. They formed when the area was part of an inland area. So let's go down and take a quick look at the overview. This sign shows you what you see in the area. This marker is on the grounds of Covenant College. It says this property has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of the Interior, and it's Carter Hall, 1928. This is the exterior of Carter Hall. And for just a little bit more information, there's this other sign here that says Carter Hall, in recognition of Paul B. Carter, philanthropist and industrialist, whose vision made possible this landmark building. So we're just barely across the Georgia line from Tennessee, just off of Lookout Mountain, still in Dade County. And this is Chief Wauhatchie's home, just east of the railroad from here and 200 yards north of the Wauhatchie Spring and Branch stood the home of Wauhatchie Chief of the Cherokees. In the War of 1812, he served in a company of the Cherokees under Captain John Brown, Colonel Gideon Morgan, and Major General Andrew Jackson, fighting the Creeks from January 27th to April 11th, 1814. Old records say Wauhatchie, severely wounded, March 27th, lost his horse. He was a signer of the Hiawassee Purchase of July 8, 1817, is listed in the U.S. Census of the Cherokee Nation in 1835, and followed the Trail of Tears westward when the Cherokees were moved from Georgia. So I hope you enjoyed what we learned about Dade County. So this was Dade County, Georgia, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Freedom Field Life.